Dr. Bill Murphy, our friend and founder and president of Good Government Now, joining us. Also associate professor of social science at the New England Institute of Technology. Hey, do you want to make any Tom Brady predictions?
I don't know. It's tough to say, but it sounds like there's more reason to believe we could have some migration there. You know?
No kidding. You say quarterbacks going everywhere. Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah, it just seems weird after so long with him being in New England. It just seems like it'd be a strange thing. But
yeah, it would be. But all the indications are he may be going. All right. So you have
I think you're right.
You have co-written this piece for thehill.com about, and we've had this conversation before. You've ruffled some feathers with it, but Congress must it's got to get its power back, right? And you know this whole idea with the executive branch obstructing. Look, whether you agree with it, I think what Congress did to the president is unforgivable, but it is political. Yes. That's what impeachment is. But this has been going on for, a decade and a half, because the previous president wrote law, right?
Yeah, you're exactly right, and I think that's important to understand. And I appreciate you framing it this way, because there's a political dimension always to this. But the key thing that we're talking about is that bigger question of the American people being in control of their government, and really Congress is the way that they do that. So this is about the authority of Congress being respected, no matter who's president or whatever the party configuration or party context is.
Well, and you know, this is we have this three-legged stool, right? And it always should be swaying a little bit, right? You got the judicial and the legislative and the executive branches, but Congress has been the one here. Now lately the courts have been doing weird stuff, because now the Supreme Court won't decide things that the Constitution says it should do, like settle disputes between states. They passed on that in this California-Arizona thing. But in the case of Congress, they have for years abdicated their responsibility to these bureaucrats that we can't elect. They've kicked all the rulemaking to these agencies, and and a lot of this administration's trying to dismantle. I mean, but Congress has done a lot of this to itself, right?
You're absolutely correct, Fred. I mean, that's really the whole story here. And the part that you're talking about, which is really crucial with the agencies, goes back to the 1970s. And really with the Clean Air Act, as I understand it, David Schoenbrod is a great expert on this stuff, and I've seen he's explained it masterfully in a book. But you're right, and a lot of it is there's been more preoccupation with spending time on things that will sell or play well to the voters, but then not wanting to do certain parts of the job where, there's kind of a price to be paid if you have to hold people accountable and whatnot. And that's been a big problem. On the plus side, though, I think there's more awareness of this in Congress. Even today, there are hearings going on looking at this question, and I'm hoping that as there's more reflection on it, that there's going to be some political courage and concerted action to start getting a more appropriate assertion of congressional authority and not allow either the courts or the executive branch to continue to kind of nibble at the edges and weaken them. But you're absolutely right. In every case, nothing happens that Congress doesn't allow to happen to itself, because it's passive for one reason or another, or finds it politically more convenient to focus its energies elsewhere. And that has really been adding up and is causing a major problem that has to be corrected.
One of the things that ruffled your feathers in this article is the fact that, Congress, when they were wanting to enforce something against the president, they went to court. Well, they're not supposed to go to court. They're equal with the court, right?
Yes, and it's a fascinating question, but they're equal or superior. But the bottom line is, and I know we've talked about this before, when it comes to deciding contempt of Congress, Congress has all of the authority it needs to do that on its own internally through this historical kind of old process called inherent contempt, where they can put the person who's in contempt or who refuses to obey a subpoena on trial convict them and punish them. So they've got the ability to do it. My argument has always been, when you have the authority and it's clearly validated by the Supreme Court, why are you going to go to a federal district court and basically forfeit or cede that authority to a judge who doesn't necessarily have the institutional interests of Congress at heart as the top thing on their agenda? So it's not a good thing. And we've just seen a couple of weeks ago the decision coming out of the D.C. Court of Appeals where, I mean, this is a real radical departure. They're arguing that Congress doesn't have the authority to go to court to enforce a subpoena because they don't have standing. I was shocked by that decision.
Yeah, me too.
They don't have on appeal.
Standing? They're one of the three pillars of our government. I mean, the whole thing is nuts.
Exactly. How can that be? I mean, you could exactly. And what I thought was most remarkable. Can
you hang on a second, because I don't want to lose that thought. But we're slaves of the clock here. I want to get to where we go from here and more on this ruling, because it's troubling, really. More of Bill Murphy coming up.
That's right.
All right, Dr. Bill Murphy and Morton Rosenberg have written this opinion piece for thehill.com. And look, we should preface this. You did say it's been going on a long time. Probably, if you think about it, probably more than 15 years. Because, I mean, you had some attacks on the previous Bush administration as well, and some pushback and some not cooperating with Congress and everything. But, the Founding Fathers and their brilliance gave us these three branches of government, and none of them are what the Founding Fathers intended lately. And that's what this whole thing's about, right?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And, it's clear to me when you read the Constitution, Article 1 that lays out the power of Congress comes first. It's the biggest article. And I think Congress is the first among equals. It was meant to drive the government and to express the will of the people. So, there's no question that there's a special prominence there, and that every citizen should really be concerned when that starts to be deteriorated, because there are a lot of forces, I think, that would rather have it that the government isn't fully accountable to the people, different special interests. So, that's a problem, and as you're suggesting, where corrective action is extremely important. And I think the other branches have probably been expanding their authority, and to a degree that's coming at the expense of Congress, and that constitutional imbalance just is not consistent with what was intended.
The scary one's the courts. I mean, here an appeals court has said Congress has no standing. I mean, excuse me? What?
Yeah, I mean, that is hard to believe, right? I mean, a more traditional way of looking at this question is that subpoena enforcement is just a standard, normal thing that courts do and have done for a long time. The district court decision said that, and other similar cases in the D.C. District Court have taken that view, and there's even some older Supreme Court precedent, affirming that going back to the 1920s. So it seems a real serious, significant, radical departure from what would be a common sense doctrine here. And it's more interesting to me in that the court, they used a case that was really about the inability of just individual members of Congress to bring suit claiming injury to the body. But this wasn't that. This was the House of Representatives had a properly authorized lawsuit that they filed, and I think they can claim also reasonably that their inability to get information caused damage to the institution, and the court just wouldn't accept either of those propositions.
But why should it even be in front of the court? That's the big question, right?
No, you're exactly right, and it shouldn't. And that's an error of Congress. And Fred, you and I have talked about this a lot. I absolutely am an opponent of using the so-called civil enforcement procedure or filing civil lawsuits in Congress to enforce congressional subpoenas. It's unnecessary. Congress has two other superior methods. The first being inherent contempt enforcement. It unifies all of the powers. Inherent enforcement is an inheritance from the British. It goes back right from the time Parliament was started in the 13th century. It was used in the American colonies, and it had been used by the federal Congress up until the mid-1930s. So, and it's been validated by the Supreme Court in at least a half dozen major cases. So there's there's no question here that is the way to go. And it's, when you look at the historical outcomes, it's been way more effective than anything else, because there are real punishments if you don't comply. You can end up in jail, or you could end up with big fines. And the same thing is true of the criminal enforcement procedure, which was enacted in 1857 kind of as an alternative method for exercising the congressional inherent contempt power. So this bad court decision is also one of the core reasons why we say Congress should not use the courts to enforce subpoenas. And it is the risk of aberrant, misguided, erroneous court decisions that diminish, perhaps permanently if they become precedent, diminish congressional power. Congress should never take that risk. It is totally unnecessary, and they should keep it in-house and do it right. And that's what we've got to get back to. And I hope that every one of your viewers will express that view to their member of Congress and their senators, because it's the people's power that is being stolen here. And this inherent enforcement power is vital to Congress getting information necessary to make good laws on behalf of the people. And as citizens, we shouldn't tolerate being steamrolled by unelected people, either in the judicial or the executive branch. We should demand that our representatives are in charge.
The other part of this is, though, sadly, we have criminals in Congress, and we have people perpetuating. and again, for those who are saying, but wait a minute, this president is under siege. He is by stuff that got made up. But if the system was followed the way it's supposed to, all that would be fleshed out, wouldn't it?
Yes, you're right. I mean, that's what I think. And I find, it's unfortunate, but I find many people are interpreting my initiative as being against the president, and that is not true at all. As you've pointed out, the real problem goes back at least 14 or 15 years, and you could make an argument a decade or two before that. So, but I think you're exactly right. Having investigations generally cannot make up information. Having Congress able to get its questions answered and get the documents it needs, wouldn't change that. In a particular situation, if there's nothing there, there's just nothing there. That's the outcome. And this procedure removes all doubt for that. It eliminates the possibilities of conspiracy theories and innuendo and people keeping these things alive for political reasons. And I think we'd all be better off, because you'd have closure, and then you'd move on to constructive problem solving more quickly in the future debates.
And it's every branch, right? The courts have become corrupted, the executive branch is corrupted, and Congress is corrupted but it all goes back to Congress, because they gave the power to all these agencies to harass American people, and they're not accountable. And then of course you had the previous administration actually wrote DACA, which now the courts are saying the administration can undo. I mean, we've got a mess in all three branches.
Yeah, the cases that you just mentioned are really concerning, and it's one of the primary drivers why I got into this. I can only hope over time that there will be enough members of Congress who are dedicated to looking at these issues, but they need a better tool. They need to resurrect their sort of native original power and assert it, or they're never going to get anywhere. And you could probably say that with the FISA abuse and the origins of the Russia probe. It looks like Senator Graham and the Judiciary Committee are starting to investigate that. I would submit they won't get anywhere if they don't bring back the ability to directly punish witnesses who don't cooperate. And I'm not expecting that all the FBI and DOJ career people are going to cooperate and be truthful with that without some pressure on them.
Well, and I'm one of those people. It takes away one of our tools, but I think FISA's dead. I think the court should be flushed down the toilet, but because of the abuse.
I agree with you. I think that should have always been done in the federal district courts. It would have been much more accountable, and they could have adequate security procedures, to accommodate those needs. But the FISA has gone off the rails.
We didn't get here overnight. We're not going to get out of it overnight. But I mean, I think what the founding fathers envisioned, and what we've tried to tie everything in a neat bow, and the founding fathers never intended that, right? They wanted this to be messy, and we've tried to clean it up. It needs to be messy. Three branches going at each other, right?
Yeah, that's the key. Yeah, people have gotten to the point where they can't be bothered with the hard work of going through that process you just described. We can't have that. We've got to shoulder the responsibility.
All right, Congress must diversify its subpoena enforcement arsenal to counter this. We got to get back to thehill.com is where you can find it. Bill, as always, we appreciate it very much. Keep up the good fight, my friend.
Okay, great being with you, Fred. Thank you.